Oh, the stream is live. Hey, welcome everyone. We're letting folks file in here. Welcome to the Expo SDK 50 launch live stream. We'll give folks a few more minutes to file in the chat. Hopefully you're having a good day out there. I'd be kind of curious in chat for whether you've been using Expo for a long time or just got started. 50 is a kind of a milestone number, nice round number. And we'd be curious to chime in. Which SDK did you first start using Expo on? Me personally, I went back and checked my first project and noticed the first commit had SDK 17. So it's been a minute. It's been a good minute.
SDK 0 for me.
Yeah, I was going to say Brent came in pretty early. Evan, what was Sunset or Expo over? What's that app you made? The Sunset Overdrive one? Which SDK was that on? Do you remember?
Expo Sunset Cyberspace. I was frantically trying to check the versioning in the history. It gets a little fuzzy back. I remember when I first started using Expo, my thinking with just kind of from using it was that there was an SDK release every month. And then to my surprise, sometimes it would be like 6 months. I don't know. Was there a time where Expo was released monthly, Brent?
I thought it was close. That's why I had a hard time remembering, because I was like, well, it's 16, it's 17, is it 14? Because it was that summer, the summer of 2017, when I made my first app.
Yeah. Let's go back to monthly releases. Just
nightlies. We just increment the STK number on every nightly build.
Yeah, every day.
3 people out.
Sunset Cyberspace was SDK 21.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I see a 12 in the chat, a 25. So we got some old timers. 41 though, so it's a little old. It's early EAS build, I think.
My last client project before I joined Expo was 23. So
nice.
Yeah, it's been a while. I remember Flatlist being like pretty hot technology and animated API.
What was the old list called? It was I can't even remember the name of it. List view?
I was going to say list view.
Yeah, list view.
I memory hold that one. And now we got fast list and I'm sure other things, but
and flash list.
So you can't argue with flash list. There you go.
Hasn't really changed much since 2017, really.
We got one person in the chat with an Exponent hoodie, so it goes as far back as when did it officially switch from Exponent to Expo? I feel like I always called it Expo, but I saw a bunch of Exponent references when I first started using it. Another Brent question.
I don't know, maybe like 5 or 6 years ago. That's a good question. I don't know what year that was in. I don't know, do we have a blog about it?
I felt like finding an Exponent reference at a certain point. It felt like when you open Apple Docs and you find like an NS reference, you'd be like, oh, it's referencing back to Exponent, the old name, or referencing back to the next step, even though, that would have been like 1 year versus like NS prefixes are going back into the 80s.
So it was March 6th, 2017 when we renamed. So.
Oh, cool. I came in just a couple months after that, started using it. I have one person champion with 40, 45, 46. Also, whether you've been using it for a while or you're new, it's all good. It's a big, wide open community, and we're happy to have you guys here, and we're happy to have you all on the stream.
Especially better if you've used it only recently.
Yeah, there you go. Well, it's about 5 or 6 after the half hour, so I think we'll get started here. So, once again, everybody who's just come in, we're welcome to the SDK 50 live stream, the Expo SDK 50. Thanks for joining us. We're going to be just talking through some feature highlights. There's so many features we could spend hours covering it, and we're going to cover them even more at App.js conference this May in Krakow, and also on live stream. But today we're going to cover a few specific features. We're going to have Cedric, who's going to talk about the DevTools plugins, and Alan is going to talk to us about SQLite and the Can-Do Camera API. Brent has a smorgasbord of different things to tell us about, including Expo Fingerprint, updates to EAS update, and the new Sentry integration. And Evan is going to talk to us about Expo Router v3 and API routes. So we'll get started there with Cedric.
All right. Should people need an introduction here? Well, maybe. So my name is Cedric. I work on a lot of things in Expo, but one of the things are debugging. Let me share my screen real quick. In SDK 48, we kind of released a new way of debugging besides Flipper. In 48, we teased a new version of debugging through the Chrome DevTools. And while that's great for most of the things, since SDK 48, you guys have all given us a lot of feedback for this debugging workflow. While some of the things are like working super well, like for example, if I pop open by pressing J, I can go into my network inspector. Oh, wait, give me one sec. Let me find my good screen. This one. All right. Can you all see my screen? There we go. So by pressing J, when you start your Expo app in the terminal, it opens the new Chrome DevTools. Now, this is great for like a lot of things, including the network inspector, where you can click on things and you can actually see all the network requests in your app. You can even go to sources and literally go through your code, add some breakpoints. But this is great for like general debugging. It's great for like checking if a certain code does the exact thing that you expect when pressing a button, for example. But with your feedback, we noticed that this is like a general purpose debugging tool. It's not super great in actually investigating what's going on in your navigation, for example. So with that and SDK 50, we released something new. The new thing is called Expo DevTools or Dev Plugins. If you go to our docs, you can find pretty much anything about it. This basically adds more specific workflows or debugging workflows to your app. With this, you can pretty much like go to any of our pre-built plugins or even create your own, install it, slap it in your app, and use it. So let's do that real quick. So in this case, I want to use the React navigation. Since we're using Expo Router, I'm going to use Bun because I'm using Bun and I like it a lot. So I'm going to slap it in real quick here. Going to our root layout, hide this for a sec, and then go here. To slap it in your app, we basically need to use two things here. Like we actually need to hook the tool into our app. So let me do that real quick here. Push this over here. But in order to connect it to React navigation, we also need the React navigation instance from, in this case, Expo Router. Or if you're not using Expo Router, you can just slap your navigation container ref in. So let me do that real quick over here. This should be good. Then I'm gonna start it again. There we go. And let's fully reload the app. Now, at first, you don't see anything change here. And that's by design, of course, because it's still a debugging tool. But if you look closely, we have a show all commands option here. So I'm going to press that. And right here, we have more tools. So if you press Shift M in your terminal, you can see like all kinds of other integration that we offer, including the React DevTools, but also the new DevTools plugin. And in this case, it's the React navigation one. So once you open it, you will have a lot more information of your app when using it. So in this case, I'm just in the home screen, right? But if I go to a certain Cleveland artwork category, you can see that actually like more information about the specific navigation event is visible over here. So we can do things like seeing if the right category or parameter is provided, and we can even go deeper and see the next event. And then if you want to go back, like this is pretty cool. We can actually invoke it from here as well. So you can pretty much swap your app or like investigate your app, debug your app through this new specialized option of debugging. These kind of things should make like a Flipper replacement, such as this new debugging flow, kind of feature complete, where you can literally go to anything. Like you can even, I'm doing it from the top of my head. So what was it? Works ID. So you can even go in here in the linking. You can see exactly what it resolves to with Expo Router. So in this case, I'm going to do work / an ID. And in this case, well, we see the ID. But this is not just contained to React navigation. There are a couple of other ones. In this project, I'm also using the React query from Tanstack. And for that, we also have actually a plugin. So let me integrate that real quick as well. So in this case, we're going to use React query. And that's not use navigation. It is use React query DevTools. In this case, I'm going to need to do a bit more than just hooking it in. I'm using the provider pattern over here. So over here, we actually have the query client instance. And in this case, I'm going to just use it from my provider since it's a singleton instance. But if you put this in any other like page or layout, you can probably just use the use query client hook provided by Tanstack. Now, let's start this again, and let's see what happens. Let's fully close this. Do I have the other one? Nope. There we go. Then by slapping Shift M again, we can actually see the React Query DevTool plugin. And over here, we can see the live data of your app. So again, I'm going to click through some categories that are fetched live from Cleveland Art API. And as you can see, like you see way more information here than you would have get with the Chrome DevTools, including like literally all data that has been loaded here or fetched, but also like the data that you store internally through use query. Some other interesting things here is that if you open the network inspector, let me minimize this a bit, put them side by side. If it fits, there you go. There's like a cool feature here where you can actually refetch the data live. So if I refetch the stuff, you can actually see the request being made, but it's not through just replaying the fetch, right? It's actually being instructed to use query to fetch it again. So not only the request is being triggered again, but also my whole state in the app is updating again. And having these kind of functionality available is such a lifesaver in debugging your app or figuring out what's going on here. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it, what I have to show. Back over to you, Keith.
Cool. Thank you very much, Cedric. We had one question in the chat that we thought was a good question was, is it possible to use this in projects not using Expo?
So as you could see, the UI for the DevTool plugin is actually served locally as well. So it's opening from the Expo CLI. So as long as you use the Expo CLI, you should be able to use these kind of DevTools plugins. Some of them may require some additional native code. And in that case, you probably cannot really integrate it properly in just a plain React Native Community CLI app. So unfortunately, it depends.
So basically, like you would need the Expo CLI, but not necessarily, you wouldn't necessarily have to have Expo modules integrated into your app.
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, thank you very much, Cedric. One of my favorite things learning about AI, I just learned about DevTools a very short time ago. And one of my favorite things about it is the DevTool UI itself is basically just an Expo app. So for years, I thought anything that was a plugin or a DevTool, I'd be like, that's level 99 wizardry. And knowing it's to make it is fundamentally something I've been doing for years as a mobile developer. It's really exciting.
Yeah, it's super exciting. Like back in the days when we didn't really focus on debugging at all, like there was an option like to use a similar flow, but it wasn't that feature complete, or it wasn't that stable, where you just could connect your browser to your app, or actually it's the reverse. You move the whole engine of your app to the browser, and you got access to like the Chrome DevTools or whatever DevTools you're running in the browser. But that's way behind us now. And having like this new workflow where you can debug directly into your app, not just by using like the Chrome DevTools or a custom socket instance like Reactotron can do, but having this functionality available to communicate directly with your app without moving the engine or without changing the environment that much is really amazing. It's awesome to use.
Cool. Thanks for presenting that. All right, next we have Alan up to tell us about and show us. And I should add before Alan gets up, if you didn't hear it already in the chat, as you have questions, pop them in the chat, and we're going to try to highlight a few and answer them as they pertain to each presentation. But we'll also have some time at the end to answer a few more questions as well. But next up, we have Alan to present the SQLite and camera APIs.
Okay, so for SDK 50, we wanted to take a look at some of our older libraries like Expo SQLite, expo-camera, and see how we could improve them. So we'd start with SQLite first. The API is completely rewritten. So before, when you had to do things like this in your effects to get your list of data, when you'd add new data, it wasn't reactive, so you'd have to fetch it all again. Same with deleting. We had no context for providing the database, so you'd have to wrap it with your own. So in the new API, we have used SQLite context. All functions can either be async or sync. You should prefer the async version so you're not blocking the threads. We also have the change listener. So now when you make changes, you can just add your to-dos and you'll have your hook to listen to the changes, and you can see when that hook fires what changes were made, what table it happened on, that sort of thing. So it's very convenient for making your UIs more responsive. As well as that, we also integrated CR SQLite support. So this is part of the local first approach. What this means is that we can have a local database and sync two clients, both using local SQLite databases, and sync them through a server. So I have a video of what that looks like. So we got 4 clients, 2 Android, 2 iOS. And all these databases are running locally. So when changes are made, as a list of these changes are sent to the server, and then these are sent back to the devices, and they all stay in sync. So it's pretty cool. This is just the initial part of this effort. So at the moment, we've built the CR SQLite extension into the SQLite library, but for the server side of it, there's still work to be done there. You'd still have to integrate that yourself, but this is the first step. And so then, as well as that, we reevaluated our camera API. For this, it was mostly changes to the API surface, and there wasn't a lot of changes to the API surface. It was merely under the hood changes. So On Android, we're now using Camera X, so that ensures device compatibility with older devices. So you don't have to. Previously with Camera 2, that was difficult to manage. So this should make it a lot easier and a lot more stable on Android. And on iOS, then we just took the opportunity to clean up the code base, modernize it a bit using our relatively new Expo Modules API, and just try to close some old issues that we had on the library. And we also added for iOS, if you're running on iOS 16, there's now a new version of the barcode scanner, which has things like guidance. Just a quick demo of it here. So it's guidance tracking. It's pretty cool. There's no external libraries. It's using Apple provided APIs. So that's available on iOS 16. And if not, if your users aren't using iOS 16, we have the legacy scanner built in. So you can also use that. In terms of using the API, we've just changed the components. It's now called camera view instead of camera. We've separated the torch from the flash mode, so things like that are easier for working with. The barcode settings are now fully typed, whereas before we had to use a constants object. Just bring that up. So before it looked like this. You didn't get any autocomplete. You just had to know it was there, or check the documentation. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the most part. Most of the changes, as I said, shouldn't be visible to users other than improve stability, performance. Hopefully it's a bit easier for users to use. And I guess that's it from me.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Alan. I just implemented that QR code tracking using the old manual way, and I didn't realize that we had that in the new API. And I'm a little upset with myself now. That is really cool. And anybody who's ever built a QR code scanner or something into an app like that, I think can really appreciate all those enhancements. And,
yeah, it is nice.
Cool. We are going to head on over to Brent, who is going to tell us about Expo Fingerprint, some updates to EAS update, and Sentry integration as well. Ooh, Brent, we can't hear you.
Of course, yes.
There you go.
All right, cool. So yeah, I'm going to talk about Fingerprint first, and kind of give some context on what it is, why we built it, what it kind of solves, and then give you like a little demo of using it along with some of these other features. So the first thing about Fingerprint is like kind of just setting the context here. I imagine a lot of people here have, while building their app, asked the question like, does this build include new native code, or does this branch pull request include new native code such that I need to initiate a new build in order to be able to run against like the local copy of JS, or like, is this update that I'm going to publish compatible with the runtime in the production app, or is it going to crash my app? And so we've kind of in the past taken an approach of recommending setting like the runtime version to a policy called native version. Native version will basically take like your app version and version code or build number and use that as the way to identify like what is the native runtime that your JavaScript app runs against. And the problem with that mechanism is that it depends on you as the developer to be aware that you are making a change that could potentially make the JavaScript incompatible with the native code in your published app. And so you need to know when that's happening, and then you need to increment your app version in order to account for that. So we wanted to answer this question in a way where like you don't need to ideally do anything. You just have something wired up that will detect when you've made a change that could impact the native runtime, and then we let you know, and ideally just base the native runtime off of that. So the way that this works is, well, one way I can demonstrate it is just run this command. So this will just, this is a CLI tool for the Fingerprint library that basically just reads all of the configuration in the current project from things like what's linked through React Native Community CLI, what do you have set in your Expo configuration, what do you have set in auto linking. And of course, all of this stuff doesn't make a lot of sense, or like it's kind of hard to parse, right? You could see, okay, we have React Native safe area context linked here, and the contents produce this hash, but like it's not really human readable and not particularly easy to read anyways. But the important thing is, rolled up from all of these properties of your app, we have a single hash. And we can use the contents here also to kind of get an idea of what changed. So if I like dump this to a JSON file, and then I do something like install expo-camera, and then I run, what is that command? This one here. So it's going to read the current fingerprint of the project and compare it with the one that I saved, so we can see what changed between these. So we could see, okay, this is our new hash, and what changed was something was detected by Expo modules auto linking for iOS and for Android. And we could see that what changed was expo-camera was added for iOS and for Android. So it's somewhat low level like JSON information here, but for most cases, all you need is this. And if you really want more information, you can look at this information. So one thing you can do with this now is you can wrap it in a script. So I've just in this project, if you look at scripts, validate fingerprint. I've written a simple script that imports from fingerprint, imports from config, and we'll just check if our runtime version is set to the correct thing. So if I run fingerprint validate, it's going to read the current fingerprint for the project, compare it to what I have set in app.json, and kind of do what I just did previously. Okay, so it tells me the fingerprint changed from the last time I ran this. It changed from this value to this value, and then it shows the diff of what we were just looking at above, so we can see what changed. So that's cool. And then if I want to set that, right, I can run this other script that I had, fingerprint set. And what this is going to do, I can show you the script. Set fingerprint. Basically, it will read the contents from the cache directory, find out well, actually, that's where we save the value to. It will find the current fingerprint, compare it to what we have in our app config, and set it accordingly. So here we have updated runtime version to this, save fingerprint here. So now if I, let's remove expo-camera, then we can validate again, fingerprint validate. I'm using TS Node to evaluate this, so it's a little bit slow, but there you go. So it changed now. We removed the expo-camera bit there. So it should work that if I stash this, right? Oops. Then if I run fingerprint validate again, so I've just gone back to the state where I didn't have expo-camera and my previous fingerprint. You can see, cool, the runtime version matches. Okay, so this is useful. Let's have a look now at something with Orbit. So Orbit, some of you might be familiar with. Let's pop open here the simulator. It's just this nice way to like quickly install a build. So I have this simulator build of this app. Right, it's just some stuff for tracking my latte art, kind of use it to test things out that I'm working on here. And so we can go over here and see our runtime version is set to 8A, whatever, not exactly intended for human consumption necessarily, but we can read here that that matches this value. So one thing I can do to use update with Fingerprint now is I can actually just like add a script that calls like update production or update preview, and it validates the fingerprint before running the command. So why don't I make a change here? I can go to the settings index screen, and actually, where am I using this? Use updates. So we have this thing here. Let's add a little bit of padding around this. Horizontal, let's just give it like 10 or something like that. So it's not like so squished up against the side. And now I should be able to run yarn update preview, right? Channel preview. So this is going to publish to that channel. And while that's running, one thing I want to point out here is I'm using the new use updates API from Expo Updates, which is a really fantastic hook. It took a lot of work to build this out and make it work in a way that was like super reliable. But we'll see a couple of places where I'm using that in this app. So currently on this screen, just to get like the currently running update, I can just output that down here really easily. And that's really nice. But then also, oops, while I'm publishing that, we can see that inside of the layout of the app. So this is using Expo Router. I'm using use updates again to check when we boot the app, like, is an update available? Do you want to download it and install it? If there's a downloaded update, prompt the user to reload the app. And finally, we also have a use effect set up based off of the app state. So if I switch from background to foreground, and we don't have a pending update and we're not checking for an update, then we check. So this, like, these properties make it super easy to implement stuff like this. So there we go. Okay, so we published that. And one thing I want to do here also is let's upload our source maps. So I said we were going to talk about Sentry a bit here as well. So we worked with Sentry on providing this really smooth integration for uploading source maps for ES Update. When you run your builds, it's automatically done. You don't have to really do anything. You just set it up and it happens. But when you publish an update, you run this command to point it to the dist directory, which is generated when you run ES Update. You could alternatively do something like this, just chain it on to the end here, right? So if you wanted to run that automatically, that would also be fine. But yeah, well, just leave that for now. Cool, so we published that. So now if I like go back here and then foreground it, oh, look, an update's available. Yeah, I want to install it, and now it's going to download. Yeah, let's install it. Cool. That was a weird little UI glitch there, but that's fine. I literally wrote this in 10 minutes, so we can work that out. You probably don't want to use an alert modal for this, by the way. It's a little intrusive. Something a little more subtle would be good. But you can see now we have the padding added, and we got that. So one last thing I want to demonstrate now is let's install expo-camera again. And then I will try running update preview. And it is going to fail. It's not going to run the update because the fingerprint changed. So now I can do fingerprint set. Again, these are just scripts that I wrote around it, but you can do whatever you want with that. And I'll talk more about that in a sec. Now, if I run update preview, it will not block me from publishing this. However, because I've added a new native dependency, the JavaScript bundle I'm publishing may not be compatible with this app. And so we'll see that as a result, we're not actually going to see the update prompt within the app. Well, that's exporting.
Well, that's exporting, Brent. We had a question Does the Fingerprint consider config plugins?
It does, yes. So we've basically opted for being quite conservative in what impacts the fingerprint. So if you change your package JSON, we don't know what that is going to do. So we treat that as potentially something that could be a change. You can also customize this with a fingerprint ignore file. So if you don't want changes to like your ES-JSON, which we also consider because that could potentially change things, or your package JSON, or certain modules that you have in your app. If you don't want those to be considered, you can add a fingerprint ignore file, and that will automatically be excluded from the fingerprint. So there's a little bit of information on that on this page here. Right, so you can include or exclude extra files. And so right now, this is like the level of customizability that we have. There are a few other options you can pass in if you use it programmatically, like I do here. But we're kind of still exploring like what is the best workflow for using this, and ultimately working towards a state where it's like just built into ES services and you don't ideally have to do anything. Okay, so I published that, right? Let's, I don't have to do that, but sure, right? So no update, which is exactly what we want here, because we would potentially crash the app if we tried to import expo-camera here. So yeah, it works great. And yeah, I guess we can show how here quickly, like I've added some debug tools. If we throw an error, crashes the app, reload the app, and then open up Sentry. Then once this shows up in Sentry, which might take a minute, it's usually pretty quick, but let's see. I'm looking at this here. We can look at an old error while that's happening, but you can see in a previous version of this build, I had called updates reload async instead of just reload async as I'd imported. I let Copilot write it for me and included a TS ignore and called this. I don't know why, but I guess AI isn't perfect yet. It's still pretty good. It was close. But you can see it gives us the source maps and tells us the appropriate place and provides all this other information. And that was all just available through running that like one script afterwards. I'm not sure why I'm not seeing the error yet, but it'll show up eventually. Anyhow, so yeah, that's mostly what I wanted to show off here. There's more information coming soon about Fingerprint. I would definitely recommend also, if you want to play with this, you could check out how this is integrated into Expo GitHub-action. There's some cool stuff here. If you want to check out a more complete example of the use updates API and cool things you can do with that, there's this updates API demo that Doug put together. Doug built this API and has some really good examples of like different flows that you can build using this approach. Yeah, so I hope that's interesting for people. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you very much, Brent. We'll throw it over to Evan now to talk about Router v3 and API routes in particular.
Hey guys. All right. Sorry, a lot of good questions in the comments here. I'll present. Yeah, share everything. Let's go. Okay. Just swap on over. So what I'm going to demonstrate today is actually an Expo example, which you can bootstrap right now if you'd like. The way you do that is inside of a terminal window, you can do npx create expo-e, and then you do with OpenAI. And what this will do is bootstrap the Expo example that I'm about to show. And as the name implies, this is going to be in an OpenAI demo. So over here, inside of my project window, I'm going to run yarn expo to start the project for every platform. Then we'll boot it up on iOS and on web. It's just, let's give this a little reload here. There might have been some Expo spoilers when I pulled up the screen there, and you could see the previous screens I was working on. So we've got our app idea generator over here. And then in the browser, I'm going to reload this web page, connect it to the web bundler. So you can kind of see down here, it is bundling the web code. I'm going to pull this in a little bit just in case the edges are cropped. And yeah, let's quickly, I guess we'll do a quick rundown of what you can do here. So with this app idea generator, very basic. We can give it some sort of term. So like maybe collecting, I don't know, public turtles. I'm not sure if that's a thing that people do, but then we will submit this request to OpenAI, and it's going to give us 2 app ideas about collecting public turtles. So this one's Turtle Tracker, which is a comprehensive app and website for tracking and documenting public turtles. Users can upload photos, log locations, and enter details about sightings to contribute to the global turtle database. And then we've got Turtle Discoveries, which is a similar, I would imagine it's got some similar, stalking of turtles in here. But what's really cool is that this is like, it's optimized for Expo type apps. We can do the same over here on this iOS thing. So I don't know, maybe displaying hats is another one. You could, we'll do this loading here. It's sending off the request to the API route. And then we've got Hat Finder and Hat Swap, 2 different app ideas. So let's look at the source code for how we set this project up here. We pop into Expo Router, this project. We've got our app directory, and then we've got one route, the index route, and then we also have an API route, which is at API/generate plus API. What this means is that we can access and hit this endpoint at API/generate. So we're going to go ahead and close down the terminal here for a second and look at, let's start with the route. Inside of here, we do export default, and we've got a React component. We've got some state to handle the loading and the content. If you had a bigger app, maybe you'd use something like React Query to handle various different types of state conditions. Then we've got some state for our input, and then this function for generating content. And then in order to actually make the data request inside of here, we just make a simple fetch request with a method post, do application JSON, and set our body with the prompt. We handle the response, we get the JSON from that, and we set the state. And then down here, when we have the content, we display it as such. Pretty straightforward, pretty basic. This is all using universal primitives. If you wanted this to be web only, you could switch all these out for things like divs and spans, and then this would only run on web. But for now, we're going to use these universal view, image, and text primitives. And then when we do API generate, this is going to call this endpoint here. We can actually see that request if we look in our browser network inspector. So we can see that we called /API/generate, and then we've got our response. And we've also got a look at the payload, which had the prompt collecting public turtles. So pretty straightforward, very standard stuff. And then here is our API route. Extremely bare bones, very simple. What we're doing in here is we have export async function post. When we export a function like this, I'm just going to go ahead and cut this down so you can kind of give it a look. Everything here, this is all based on the modern standard. This is using WinterCG, so we're just returning like average responses, pulling in average requests. On our request, we're doing request.json to extract the prompt message. Then we're logging out the prompt just for the sake of debugging. So here in our server logs, we can see the prompt down here. We'll actually be improving some of this logging in maybe a patch release, I guess. And then when we get our prompt, we're going to append it here to this content string. So we've got generate 2 app startup ideas that are optimal for Expo Router, where you can develop a native app website simultaneously with automatic universal links and API routes. Format response is JSON, specifying what the keys should look like, and then we add the prompt based on the context. Then we make another request to OpenAI. OpenAI does have a Node API, but like, because this is all just so bare bones and so simple, we're trying to keep this as close to the web as possible, and then allow Expo users to build on top of it however they like. But the baseline should be, data fetching works with just normal fetch. So we're going to make that endpoint request. And then something that's really magical here is that inside of our headers, we've got our authorization and we've got our secret key. So the secret key is loading from the .m file. And as I was rehearsing this, I moved everything to the .m.local file, which is usually where you'll keep your secrets ignored. And so this is what's committed in the template. And that is then passed to the OpenAI servers. So if we bundle everything up and we look at the bundle, this secret key won't be inside of that bundle, which is really awesome because you guys have probably all experienced this where maybe you're setting up like authentication, and at some point, if it's any SaaS, it'll be like, here's your client secret. Now make sure you don't put this in the client code, and then it's like, where do you put it? Expo Router now has an answer for that. You put it here in your server code. Then we just standard make a fetch request, extract the JSON. Then we're going to turn it into a response.json and return it. If it was an error, then we will make a status 400 so that we can handle the error like we would any other backend call, and then we're good to go. So yeah, and if we make any other sort of request here, like for instance, I'll just pull open my my terminal. I'll make a new little window, and I'll do like curl localhost 8081. Let's do API generate, and so this will just be a get request, HP : // and you see we'll get the error method not allowed. So Expo Router is automatically handling get requests, head requests, every other type of request except for the ones that we have indicated, which is, it's really nice. So there's just a lot of boilerplate which is folded away and hidden behind the scenes, and a lot of reasonable defaults that just keep you moving really quickly and help you from stubbing your toe. So now we will close this down, and yeah, what else have we got here? I think that's about it. So yeah, I mean, in here, if we wanted to make that get request work, we could do something like get, and then return response.json, like maybe hello. Oh, look at that. Well, actually, we're going to go hello to the whole universe because this is universal development. And now we got our hello universe down here. So it's just super snappy, super snazzy. Oh, another thing that I really like about this, one thing that always drives me crazy when I build some sort of backend with my React Native project is that the language features just don't line up. So for example, say I'm over here and maybe I have like a utils folder. Inside of utils, maybe I've got like some special math, math file. And then I've got like add, and you could take, A and B, and you can add them together, A plus B. And now likely I'll be using that over here, and I'll be like, okay, I forgot how to add, so I'm going to pull in my utils. And you see it pulled it in using this alias that I have set up. So in Expo Router v2 and SDK 49, we added support for these TypeScript aliases. And in SDK 50, we've turned it on by default and stabilized the API. So it aligns correctly with VS Code. So I can just naturally get autocomplete and jump around. The way this is set up is in my TS config. I've set up my paths and I set the value like so. But because it's all unified, it's all universal, we can do the same thing in our API routes. So we can come over here and we can do add, and it will pull it in same way, and everything will compile same way as well. So if we throw that on there, maybe make another request, universe +3. So lightning fast and just the same language features everywhere, single configuration, and we don't have to worry about like one JavaScript environment being radically different from another JavaScript environment, which it just feels like really nice as you're especially working across a bigger team. So let me swap back over here real quick, stop screen sharing, see what kind of questions we've got.
So we have one question from the great one. The API routes aren't web only. So I guess maybe you could clarify what is running the API routes and maybe even like a hint into how you would actually deploy them.
Yes, all fantastic questions and great points. So let's go back to sharing the screen here real quick. The way that we deploy API routes, Expo API routes, really did not want to Google stuff, but here we are. Let's just pop this open. In our deployment section here, and remember, API routes are actually, these are experimental in Expo Router v3. We're still working out various kinks, especially with the API, trying to figure out, because like the deployment story is really important. Because with deployment, there's options like deploying to the edge, and the edge doesn't have all the same node APIs. So we're trying to figure out like how to keep things feeling the same between development and production. But if you want to deploy these, they don't run on your native device. These run in a server. So when you develop an Expo app, you're always connected to a dev server here. That's why there's a URL. And in production for the native app, we will compile everything, and then we will embed the JavaScript and assets in your device for offline use. And then if you use something like EAS update, there is actually still a server there where you can ping to make requests and download assets. On the web, there's always a server in both dev and prod, and API routes extends that web server functionality. So certain, basically there's a server handler, and then it knows which routes are static and which routes are dynamic. And if you have a static route, then we return one of these normal routes like index. If you have a dynamic route, we'll return something like these API routes. Similarly, you can just have static files in here as well. So you could create, public, and you could be like, hey, and put hey in there. And then if we come down here and we do hey, we're going to get hey. So we're going to get the contents of this static file in the public folder. And then these will be copied into dist. When you go to deploy, assuming that you have web output set to server, this will generate your output such that it can be deployed with a dynamic server. So we'll do yarn expo export, we'll do -p web. I'm just gonna bundle up our website here real quick, and then do all the extra optimizations to make it production ready. We're gonna see our various routes that it exported, the API routes, and then the files that we bundle for web. So that all goes into the dist folder. We'll have our hey file, top level file, and then inside of our server code, we're going to have our routes JSON, which indicates which API routes exist, HTML routes, and then the not found routes. The reason we added not found is because it's a special type of route which gets matched after everything else, after nothing else can be found, then we'll match the not founds. And then inside of here, we've got our functions. So this is the function all rolled up into a single file, so that everything is self-contained ahead of time. And you see it's bundled with Metro. So yeah, pretty lean. If you were to compare this to like for instance, a client route with Chaz React Native, you'll notice it's substantially larger. So some big differences there. And then if you want to deploy, you can deploy this the same place you might deploy your website. We've got options for custom deployments with Express. The same deal with Netlify, which is what I use for my blog, and then Vercel. You can deploy to any of these options. So when you go to deploy your native app, you'll also need to deploy your website. And the responsibility falls on you to ensure that your universal API endpoints, which are unversioned, continue working with every version of your app, which could potentially be deployed. So this is something that existed before Expo API routes. It's an issue that we have not currently solved or have any solution for. And in the future, we may potentially provide some solution to automatically version the endpoints with your native client. One other thing I wanted to touch on really quickly that I'd forgotten about is this. So there's actually a little bit of magic going on here with this fetch request that we're making, where it's making a relative fetch request to /API/generate. So how does it know where to append this. Like, how does it know where the dev server is? In development, it's obvious, like we can just inject that based on whatever the bundle is downloaded from. And in web, it's also obvious because when the website is downloaded, it will have window.location from the URL that you accessed. On native, this is a lot less obvious because it could be any URL you want. So by default, this functionality is disabled. It is not turned on. And you need to manually opt into it by going into the app.json and setting the Expo Router config plugin origin property. So here I just have some mock URL, which doesn't work. But you need to set this to wherever your website is going to be. So for instance, if this were associated with my website, I would have evanbacon.dev, and then it would know in production for native to append that here before this value. And then in web, it just uses whatever's available. So, you know, in the future, what we would like to do is have more of a server-first approach to at least one particular workflow of developing with Expo Router, and things like this and things like versioning can all be automated away. But for right now, this flow is kind of native and universal first. So these features need to be opted into. Any other questions?
Awesome. Thank you. Let's see if you can answer this one real quick because we got very little time left. But a question I think it was alluding to from Fatih, like, can you do a deployment that's a server only API routes and just doesn't have anything else in it?
Yeah, great question. No, you cannot, because the routes are, you know, like if you think about it, like what would happen if you had an API route and that API route only ever needed to update at build time? Like potentially you would want to execute it at build time, compile the output as a static file and put it in your dist folder so that you're not making a dynamic request. The HTML is effectively the same as this, where everything is actually a server rendered request and it comes from an API route. The HTML only exists because we're making the network requests at build time as kind of an optimization. So you can think of it like SSR, but it happens earlier on. And we'll be exploring more of this with server components in the future. So yeah, like everything is effectively API routes. And when there are static files, that is a cached variation of an API route that is being added to your deployment.
Cool. Thank you very much. I mean, there's so when we're wrapping up here, there's so many other things we would love to talk to you. We could talk for hours about this release. There's so much in there, but you can head over to expo.dev/changelog. You might have to scroll down a bit to get the SDK 50 notes because we also have the Expo Router v3 changelog right above that. So you can check out both of those. You can continue this conversation. Go to our Discord at chat.expo.dev, and we'd love to talk to you more about all these features there. And also stay tuned for more info about App.js, our big conference from May 22nd to 24th in Krakow. We'd love if you can attend there live. You can learn more at appjs.co, but also we'll have a live stream, so you'll be able to tune in that way and see what's going on and hear more about what is the future of Expo. So thank you very much for everyone here, and we look forward to talking to you more.